Okay, so welcome everyone. We are going to speak about this year's Presidential Fellowship competition, as well as the alumni grants for graduate research and scholarship, to give you information about both of these funding opportunities. So three of us are going to be presenting. Myself, my name is Ryan Provost. I'm the Director of Student Services and Graduate Studies, and I'll allow my co-presenters to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Zhong Lin. I'm a professor in the program of educational psychology in Ed Studies. Good to see you all.
Hi, everyone. I'm Antoinette Arante, and I'm an associate professor in philosophy and history of education, ed policy, and qualitative research. Kind of go across three areas. Good to be here.
Thank you. So the three things we want you all to take away from this is to first understand the application process. The applications can be very cumbersome, especially for the presidential fellowship, and have a lot of detail involved. And so we want to make sure that everyone fully understands the processes, the deadlines, the requirements, so that you're able to submit a strong application. And we want to be able to help you identify some strategies that you can implement to make sure that your application is strong, that if you're writing a nomination letter on behalf of an applicant, that letter is as strong as it can be. And then we want you to be able to identify where you can go if you have further questions or need additional support after this session. So we'll start by going over the Presidential Fellowship and everything that is involved with that particular application process. And we'll also make sure to go over some common questions and some tips and suggestions for strengthening that application to make it as strong as possible for our applicants. And then we'll go over the AGGRS. Similarly, we'll go over everything involved in that particular application, as well as some tips for that. And then we will have some time for Q&A. So to dive right in, this is the Presidential Fellowship that we'll go over first. Feel free to scan the QR code or go to the website at the bottom of this slide. The slides will also be available separately from the recording on the website afterwards. So if you feel free not to take vigorous notes, the slides will be available afterwards. But the Presidential Fellowship, like a lot of our fellowships that the grad school offers, provides financial support so that you may devote 1 year or 3 consecutive semesters of full-time study to the completion of the dissertation without being impeded by other responsibilities. So the award for the Presidential Fellowship is the payment of tuition, as well as general, non-resident, and learning technology fees. There are other fees that you're responsible for, but that's all covered on the website. There's also a monthly stipend. While I can't speak to what that'll be for the following year, the stipend for this 24-25 year is $3,000 a month. So count on it to be somewhere around that. And then in addition, the Presidential Fellowship comes with a one-time $500 supplemental payment added to that first stipend payment, to be used however the awardee sees fit to further their project. To be eligible for the Presidential Fellowship, you must be a PhD student in candidacy, or you must have passed your oral exam for your candidacy by October 23rd of this fall. You must have a 3.5 minimum GPA on all of your Ohio State coursework, and all your degree course work must be completed by the time you are activating the fellowship. You must have at least 1 autumn and 1 spring semester remaining in your candidacy to be eligible. You can't have been previously awarded a fellowship that has dissertation year support. So if you only got a 1-year fellowship for your first year of studies at Ohio State, but you don't have any fellowship covering your dissertation year, you are eligible. But if you have a multi-year fellowship already, you would not be eligible. If selected, you must not hold another paid student appointment during the term of the fellowship. So you couldn't have a GA position, for example, while you're on this fellowship. And then students who were previously nominated but were not awarded can be nominated again, provided you still meet all the other eligibility criteria. So the nomination procedures for the Presidential Fellowship, students you do not apply directly to the grad school for this particular fellowship. You apply to our Ed Studies Graduate Studies Committee, and then the Graduate Studies Committee looks over all the nominations and puts those forward to the graduate school. Our Graduate Studies Committee can nominate up to 6 candidates to the grad school for the competition. So our committee will review all of the nominations that come through and will select up to 6 that will go forward. The nominated students' research project should be sufficiently advanced so that the selection committee on both our Ed Studies Committee as well as the Graduate Schools Committee can make a comprehensive evaluation of the work, and the completion of the dissertation must fall within the fellowship timeline. So those 3 consecutive semesters, the expectation is you would be able to finish your dissertation by the end of that funding timeline. So the following application materials must be submitted again to the Graduate Studies Committee. And it's this email address that, again, will be shared, but that is the email that you will send everything to for the Presidential Fellowship. So you would need to send your current academic advising report, which you can find in Buckeye Link, your complete graduate vitae, an abstract of your dissertation proposal, which is 350 words or less, your research statement, which is no more than 5 pages double-spaced, and it has all the qualifications for that there. An advisor statement of recommendation from your advisor, which I have more information about on the next slide, as well as 3 letters of evaluation from evaluators other than your advisor. And it's highly recommended that at least one of these letters be from an external reviewer, typically someone from another institution. And when we get into tips and things that will strengthen your application, we'll speak more to these particular items. For the advisor statement and the letters of evaluation, if your advisor or any of those evaluators would like to, they can send their letter directly to the Graduate Studies Committee. They don't have to send them to you first and then have you forward them. They can send them directly to our committee. They just need to make sure that it's clear who they're writing the letter on behalf of so that we can organize those letters where they need to go. So for the advisor statement, that needs to be no more than 3 single-spaced pages, and they should describe things like the major significance of the project, the relevance of the project to the field or to the advisor's particular research efforts, the students' unique contributions to the project, the evaluation of the students' research progress so far, the projected plan of research and the timeline for completion to verify that the student will be complete by the time the fellowship would be done. And then a summary of the professional reputations of whoever's submitting those letters of evaluation and any connections they may have to the student or to the advisor to indicate just what those connections are. And then once all those are collected, the Graduate Studies Committee chair will submit their own nomination letter for students selected by our committee. So the Grad Studies chair does need to submit a letter, but you do not have to worry about that for getting that submitted. The 6 students that the committee selects to move forward, the chair will go ahead and write that letter on behalf of that student to include in the package. So you don't have to reach out to anyone to get that letter written. So some dates and deadlines to be mindful of. So October 9th is when all application materials must be sent to the Ed Studies Graduate Studies Committee. That is because the Graduate Studies Committee needs time to review these letters and to select the up to six students who would be put forward for the grad school competition. So they'll spend a couple weeks after that reviewing those applications and selecting our nominees to move forward to the graduate school. And then October 23rd is the deadline for our Graduate Studies Committee to get those nominations submitted to the graduate school. So you may see on the website for the Presidential Fellowship that it says October 23rd is the deadline. And that's true. That's the deadline for us to get everything submitted to the grad school. And so in order to be able to review applications and select our 6 nominees, that's why our deadline for Ed Studies is October 9th. So you may even see other deadlines that other departments may have for theirs that are different. Just know October 9th is the Ed Studies deadline for our applications to get submitted to the Grad Studies Committee. So with that, we do have some information about where we have seen presidential fellowships be awarded previously. We have not had students selected the last couple of years, which is one of the reasons we wanted to host this session, is to give some advice and some tips for how to strengthen the application. The grad school does award between typically 30 to 40 presidential fellowships a year. So it is a very competitive fellowship. So I don't think it speaks necessarily to the quality of our students that we haven't gotten in the past couple of years, but we're a very competitive department, and we want to have some of our students selected for these. So we want y'all to strengthen your applications. So with that, I will hand it over to my co-presenters to talk more about what will strengthen the Presidential Fellowship application.
Shall I, or go ahead?
Oh, sure. Maybe I can start
Sure.
by saying that this presidential fellowship is a university-wide fellowship competition. In other words, when preparing for this fellowship application, it is important to keep in mind that your audience can come from every single possible program or department from OSU. And from the previous slide, you may see that there are a couple of departments who seem to have higher chance of getting this award. It tends to lean towards STEM area. However, and Ryan, is true that over the past 2 or 3 years, we did not have a student winning this award. But if we look back to 5 or 8 years ago, we did have 2 students from educational psychology. And the most recent awardee from our department was a student from learning technology. So these are the 3 awardees from our department that I can recall. As Ryan said, that's the reason why we are hosting this information workshop. We want to provide more information to our students and faculty and help you be more prepared for this university-wide competition. And Dr. Arante has been on the review committee for a couple of years. Maybe Antoinette, you can pick up from here and let us know what the review process looks like.
Sure. Thank you. So I think it might help for you all to kind of think like a reviewer, what their experience is like. They're given a set of criteria. They're often in the form of questions like the ones that are listed here, which we'll go over. And it is usually for these competitions, both at US and actually at OSU, and actually in every review that I can think of for fellowships, even with external foundations, reviewers are asked to rank order the applications that they get. And that's really important because everybody who's nominated to this competition is fabulous. It's the best of every department. And so when you're forced to rank order as a reviewer, you're forced to look for things that might be minuscule, that have nothing to do with how wonderful your particular application is, but how it stands in relation to others. And it can be very minor things. So keep that in mind as we go through some of these. So these are some common questions that reviewers are asked, I think, across the board that you might want to keep in mind in assessing the quality of your own proposal, because in the end, the only way a reviewer can gain a sense of the quality of your study and how, most importantly, just how prepared you are to actually engage in the research and complete in a timely manner comes from the quality of your proposal. Certainly the supporting materials are important, but the proposal is what you say in your own voice, not your advisor or your CV. So some of the questions are, to what extent does the narrative discussion of the proposal show knowledge of the relevant research of the field? Are you citing important and sufficient research? To what extent is the study's argued relevance convincing? To what extent is the study likely to yield new knowledge about an important issue? Why does your study matter? Why is it important to the field? To what extent is the research plan logical and clear? To what extent does the proposal make a case that the project is likely to be compelling and important to the broader field of the applicant's research? To what extent does the narrative discussion display strong authorship skills with clear organization and structure? And is the applicant likely to complete their project within the time frame of the fellowship? This is not reviewers' first rodeo. We can usually spot someone who really needs this fellowship and probably has a great project, but isn't quite ready yet to engage in their project. I applied for a Spencer 3 times before they finally figured out that I was actually ready to do my dissertation. So be honest with yourself about that. And does the applicant have the relevant expertise to carry out the research? So these are actually important both for applicants as well as faculty who are writing letters, some criteria to keep in mind. So just some tips on writing a good proposal. Make sure that whatever they ask in the proposal, whatever is asked of you to include in the proposal and in your application, make sure that you include those, because if they're not there, then you can't, it's not a criteria that they can score you on. Consider what kind of questions reviewers may ask, like the ones in the previous slide. Begin strong. And by what I mean by that is try by the end of the first page to clearly articulate what the purpose of your study is and what the major research questions are. Then you can go into the background and the justification and all of that. And the reason that I say that is reviewers tend to have 15 to 20 applications. If they have to wade through pages and pages to get to the purpose of your study, they're going to lose the train of thought. So it shows that you can articulate the purpose of your study clearly. Do write for a general audience, I'm sorry, as was mentioned earlier, the reviewers come from all over campus. They are likely not to be in your field. If they cannot understand your proposal, it's, in my experience, the number one reason why someone's proposal will go to the bottom of the pile. It's just out of necessity, because if they can't understand what you're saying, they don't have grounds to really to score your proposal with, in any significant way. And in relation to that, just avoid turgid writing. If your sentence is a paragraph long, probably you need to go back and edit and clean it and clean it up. Try to avoid using a lot of technical terminology. It just makes it harder for a general audience to understand your work. If you're working on a project that's related to your advisor's project or to a larger research project that you're a part of, make sure that you articulate what is your distinct contribution. What reviewers are looking for is, can this student work independently? Is the student capable of independent scholarly work? Right from the heart, a reviewer may not remember everything that everybody writes, but they will remember the application where somebody really writes from the heart, that they really love what they're doing, that they are committed to the research that they're doing and committed to its importance. Sometimes that can get lost if you're trying to write with a voice other than your own. If you're trying to sound smart, you are smart. You don't have to pretend to be smart. So just write in your own voice and really speak about why it is that your study is so important. Be explicit from about your timeline. Again, if you can't be explicit, the tendency is for reviewers to think, maybe the student isn't so clear about what their timeline is. So, and again, what is your experience and relevant expertise? So if you can situate your study in relation to your broader expertise and scholarship, that always helps a reviewer to see you as a scholar, not just this project, but also what is your profile as or portrait as a scholar.
Mm-hmm. And I can chime in with the last 2 points. When the Graduate Studies Committee reviewed applications, a common issue that we saw across the prior applications was that the timeline was either too ambitious or too limited. And by ambitious, we mean that the students may be proposing to do a lot of great work, but is it possible to do all these great work within a 3 consecutive semester time frame? And so this is where the advisor and applicant can collaborate to strengthen this part in both advisor's letter and applicants' materials. If you can have a very clear study timeline to persuade reviewers that, yes, this is a feasible plan. And as the fellowship ended, you will be able to complete your dissertation successfully, then you will have a higher chance of being funded. And then with regard to the last point, reviewers would want to know where you are at this stage of your PhD career. Have you passed your IRB? Have you completed your candidacy exam? Do you have publications that are relevant to the proposed project? And all of these should come together to strengthen your application.
Okay, shall I go? Dr.
Yes.
So suggestions for faculty writing letters of recommendation. Again, to underscore that reviewers have to rank order these proposals, and they're often excellent. And so just like an incomprehensible proposal will get you scored lower, at the end of the day, a short letter or a letter that seems generic necessarily gets a student scored lower, even if objectively speaking, that may not be your intention and it may seem glowing. So I would say that the letters that impress reviewers are at least a couple of pages long. They address all of the specific criteria requested by the fellowship, what is intellectually distinctive about the applicant, and do so in a personal way. So any stories that really can shed light on your personal connection with the applicant, with the student, that personalizes the letter, that shows your kind of your commitment to this student, why you think they're so fabulous, really helps. The other thing that also really helps is to give the reviewers a sense of the quality and quantity of the scholarship of the student, as is relevant for your field, or so for how they compare to other scholars at a similar point in their career. Across the university, it may be that in some fields, conference presentations are more important than publications. This is often true in the sciences. In some of the humanities, there is no expectation that students will publish before they finish their dissertation, and then they turn their dissertation into a book. So any guidelines that you can give to the reviewers to help them understand how the quality and quantity of this particular applicant in relation to others in the field and the expectations of the field will really help reviewers. So I hate to say that, the visual representation of a longer letter matters, but in the end it does. But in addition to what you include in there. So anything related to, your first impressions of a student and how fabulous they were, or their collegiality with other students in the department, or how they are thought of by other faculty in the department. Any information like that really gives a reviewer a personalized sense of the applicant will really help. And I really just want to underscore sometimes the difference between the ranking of a student is that letter. And just because one student's letter seems a little more glowing than the others. So I can't stress enough how important those letters really are.
And I want to add that for presidential fellowship, students are strongly encouraged to have an external letter, as mentioned in Ryan's previous slide. And getting an external letter takes time. Oftentimes, faculty or experts, they don't like last-minute requests. So if this is something that you want to pursue, we strongly encourage you to start thinking about who you would like to request a letter from. And you might want to reach out by this time so that you can give letter writers enough time to craft their well-convincing letters for you.
Yes, and the more highly visible the external reviewer is, if it's someone that is highly visible or well respected in the field, the better it looks in your application. So yes, Dr. Lin is right, absolutely. Try to think about this as far in advance as possible.
So I believe yes, that was our last slide on the presidential fellowship. I can stop and pause. I haven't seen anything in the chat, but I can stop and pause a moment if there are any questions about presidential fellowship, or we can move forward and save any questions for the end, but just wanted to open it up for a quick moment. Seeing that, we'll move through and keep on trucking, and then we'll have time at the end for any other questions. So the alumni grants for graduate research and scholarship are another award given out at from the grad school. These are small grants of up to $5,000 to support the research and scholarship of doctoral students or candidates for their dissertations. And most of the grants that are given out are at about the $2,000 or $3,000 level, and only a small number of awards are given out at that $5,000, but they vary depending on the application. And again, you can scan this QR code to see the full page of information about the AGGRS, or wait till later when I make these slides available. So to be eligible for these grants, the PhD student must be in candidacy. Funding must be for work that is essential to the student's dissertation. The students who are receiving any kind of stipends from a GA position or fellowship can also apply for these grants. So it does not preclude you. If you have a GA position, if you have a fellowship, you can still apply for these grants to be funded in addition to that other funding you may have. If you have previously received one of these grants, you are not eligible to receive another. You can only receive these once. However, if you applied previously and you were not awarded, you are eligible to apply again. And then applicants who are requesting to use grant funding to compensate human research participants must have already received full IRB approval before the program can disperse the grant funding from the graduate school to compensate those participants. So you have to have the IRB approval to use that funding for human research participants. So the application for the alumni grants is very different from the presidential fellowship. So students will apply directly to the graduate school. You do not apply to our department or to our graduate studies committee. You submit your application directly to the graduate school and their fellowship email address that is on this slide and will be on the website. The final application materials must be submitted as one single combined PDF. So you can't submit a bunch of different documents. They are looking for one PDF. Now, they specify to not submit it as a portfolio PDF because that can be funky on their end. They must be in one single combined PDF format. And if you have any issues with doing that or with Adobe, please feel free to email me and I'm happy to assist anyone in getting those files combined for you. I have the capability to do that, so I'm happy to help any of our students put those together if you do not have that ability or struggling with figuring that out. And then the one thing that can be submitted separately are letters of recommendation. Those can be submitted separately as an attachment to the graduate school, but please note, like with the presidential fellowship, it just needs to be very clear for whom that the letter of recommendation is written for. And when I say clear, I mean like include their name number, include their student ID number, because there may be multiple students with the same name or a similar name. So it's always important to include some very distinguishing information. And at OSU, that's typically your name number and or your 9-digit student ID number. Application materials, again, that must be submitted to the grad school include a budget. So a detailed line item budget that provides, doesn't have to be exact cost, but at least your estimated cost for each of the items that you're including. They want the relevant categories spelled out of what those can be, but they just want to see what that grant is going to be used for and approximately what each item is going to cost. Again, like I mentioned, if you are planning to compensate human research participants, you must include the IRB status of your project. Now, if you're not planning on doing that, you don't need to, but if you are planning on compensating human research participants, you do need to include information about where you are in the IRB approval process. Your CV, and again, that's a 2-page maximum, and it includes things like the degrees you've gotten, your employment, financial support you've received, publications, presentations, exhibitions, performances, awards you've received, membership in any professional organizations or honor societies, And again, that's 2 pages maximum for that CV. And then a letter of recommendation from your advisor. And they're just looking for that one letter from your advisor that addresses the significance of your project, the relevance to your field of study, your contribution to the field, an evaluation of your plan of work and your timetable for completing your project, and an explanation for why this funding is needed. So the deadline to submit your application for the alumni grant is September 25th by 5 p.m. And all applications, again, must be submitted to the graduate school directly. If you are needing assistance with getting the PDF formatted, I would recommend getting that to me. Like if you need me to help you with that, like I mentioned earlier, I'm happy to, but please give me at least 1 business day ahead of time so I can help you with that. So by Tuesday the 24th at the absolute latest, so that I can help you get that combined. If you send it to me on the 25th, I can't guarantee that I will be able to get to that in time. But if you get it to me by the 24th, I will be able to get that to you. So I'll turn it over to my co-presenters to provide some tips for the alumni grant.
Dr. Lynn, do you want
to? Yes, I want to say that with the alumni grant, we have quite some success over the past few years. There are a couple of ed studies students winning this award to support their dissertation. I would highly strongly encourage you to reach out to these successful awardees and seek their opinions or advice. You can also search some additional information about the past awardees from the website. I think they can be quite helpful to you. And then another thing that I want to mention about this alumni grant is based on my observations of our students' experience. This grant has very particular requirements toward budgets. There are certain things that are fundable and some things that are not prohibited. And they are clearly listed on this application website. So please take a close look at these items and justify your budget in your application materials. And Antoinette?
Thank you. I think overall, the recommendations are quite similar to the presidential fellowship. As far as I recall, the kind of criteria that's used to evaluate the proposals is quite similar in terms of, is it a well-written proposal? So these questions still kind of, sorry, you can go to the tips, Ryan. I mean, the questions are about the same, but because as are the tips, a strong proposal is very important from you and also from your advisor. I think because these particular grants are to fund specific aspects of your dissertation research, the clearer you are about the budget is certainly very important.
Mm-hmm.
What the reviewer will be looking for specifically, the matter of is the student qualified and ready to conduct the kind of research for which they are asking these particular funds. So being as clear as possible about what the purpose of your study is, what you will use these funds for, anything that helps a reviewer to get a sense that you are prepared to engage in the research for which you will be using the fund. So an example, if you're asking money for something related to conducting interviews, and there's no sense from your application that you've identified participants, that you have any kind of training in conducting interviews, that sometimes if it doesn't seem that you have thought through some of the ethical questions that might relate to particular participants. So if you are interested in interviewing protected classes or regarding research questions that might be particularly sensitive, anything that indicates that you are aware of this and that you have explored this, that you've explored this with IRB, all of that really becomes more, more important to the overall application. And that applies to the faculty letter as well, in terms of amplifying your a faculty an advisor's confidence that the student can complete the work, that they are prepared to conduct the work, is really important. What you don't want to happen is for the reviewer to say, well, you know what, the advisor explained the student's research project better than the student themselves, because that speaks poorly to your proposal, but it also makes a reviewer wonder, well, just how independently is the student working on this study? Again, it has to do, reviewers want to fund as many of these proposals as they possibly can. So give them every opportunity to give you the money, if you want to think about it that way. And, just to highlight again, those letters, if anything that suggests that it's a generic letter, or that, sometimes a letter can seem to be damning with faint praise, that all gets the reviewer wondering, well, is the advisor really supportive? Are they really confident that a student can conduct this research? So anything that you can do to really talk about how fabulous the student is, how wonderful and important the research is, and your confidence that they can complete the study is really important.
And I want to highlight a major difference between Presidential Fellowship and AGGRS. With the Presidential Fellowship, it is a fellowship in the sense that it is a funding to support students' entire dissertation study throughout 3 consecutive semesters. So in the application, reviewers would expect to see how you would progress from maybe applying for getting an IRB approval to data collection and then academic writing, write-up and defense. With AGGRS, the funding is up to $5,000. So the scope of work is expected to be smaller, but that doesn't mean you can't present your dissertation as a whole, but it is totally okay to indicate that you want to use this scholarship to support a specific aspect of your dissertation. You may, I have seen successful students stating in the application that they want to use this fund to help them collect data. Or this may be a fund to support their write-up of the dissertation. So it is important to keep in mind that this is a scholarship that has a smaller scope of budget, and it is perfectly fine to be specific about which aspect of your dissertation that you would like to get support from this award.
We do have some questions in the chat. Before we get to those, I do want to just remind everyone, again, the session has been recorded, and a recording of the session, as well as a PDF of the actual slides that we covered, will be available on the website that the registration link was on. It'll also be shared out in next week's student newsletter. So, and we'll email it out to everyone who registered for this session once the recording is available. So you will have access to that. But to get to some of the questions, a first one I received was, does the IRB need to be approved first before applying for the alumni grant? And I don't believe it does. You do need to, if you are planning on using any of the grant funding for human research participants, you do need to include the IRB, where the project is at in terms of the IRB approval. And I certainly think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that if you do have the IRB approval, that certainly would strengthen your application. But it isn't required. What is required, you would have to have, if you are using any of the grant for compensating human research participants, you do have to have the IRB approval before you could have access to the funding. So that is required, but it doesn't need to necessarily be acquired before the application deadline.
Yes, I agree with Ryan. Yeah, you don't need to have an IRB approval during your application stage, but once you get the funding, you need an approval to execute the funding.
And then we did get another question about the timeline for presidential fellowship. So we spoke some to a timeline being possibly too ambitious or limited for being able to be accomplished within 3 semesters. So what would an ideal timeline look like? What kinds of things would be included, like IRB approval, data collection information, preliminary analysis? Should students include the dissertation process in the timeline? Anything like that?
So in my experience, it varies significantly. This might be something that is worth discussing with your advisor. Your advisor will more likely have an idea of whether your timeline is reasonable. An unreasonable timeline is to say you are dedicating 1 month to data collection, 1 month to data analysis. It almost doesn't matter what kind of data analysis you're doing, and 2 months to write the dissertation. That is likely going to be an unreasonable timeline. So I've seen everything from people saying, I'm spending this amount of time on IRB, I'm spending this amount of time for data collection, and then X amount of time for writing the dissertation, getting it to my committee. To other people saying, I'm going to spend this amount of time writing chapters 1 and 2, this amount of time writing chapters 3 and 4, and getting feedback from my committee. So it really varies significantly. If there's anything that may seem off from your timeline, like it doesn't seem reasonable, which is why I think it would be helpful to discuss with your advisor, it would be good to highlight that. And what I mean by that is, if you've made a lot of, if I've seen proposals where a student says they're going to go to do international research and interview 20 participants in a 3-week timeline. It really helps for you and for your advisor to say, this student has lots of contacts, they have done a lot of previous field work, they have identified participants, they understand the context, and I am confident that they can actually do it in this timeline, even though in this timeline. So anything like that, I think really talking to your advisor personally could give you a better sense of what's reasonable or not.
And then another important thing to note is that for presidential fellowship, reviewers would expect that by the end of the fellowship, students will be able to graduate and complete the dissertation and graduate. And this graduation timeline needs to be taken into account in your study timeline. That's why it's important to communicate with your advisor. Let's say if you are anticipating to graduate in the spring of 2025, it's not possible to have your oral defense in April or May. That's too late. Our university and the graduate school requires that everyone who wants to graduate in the spring semester must defend and orally defend the dissertation by the middle of March. And that's a very tricky but important timeline to be aware of. Otherwise, you will miss the deadline and you will have to have another semester, which is the summer term, to complete your graduation process.
Another question regarding the alumni grant. How does the amount awarded get decided? Does the student request the amount, or does the awarding committee determine the amount?
That's a good question. AGGRS requires an itemized budget plan. In other words, how much money do you want to spend on hiring an hourly RA to work with you? How much money do you want to spend on travel? How much money do you want to spend on purchasing software or other items? Everything needs to be detailed in your item budget plan, and that should add up to $5,000. And the reason why most of our applicants get $2,000 to $3,000 is because that's all they can list in the budget. That's the most reasonable budget plan for their proposed study. I hope that answers the question. And I believe the reviewers will later decide whether they would approve your proposed budget or maybe reduce it to a feasible amount.
So to follow up on that, a student can request a certain amount, and then the award committee could then say, you may have requested $4,000, but based on the availability of funds and the particular proposal, we're going to give you $3,000, correct?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Another question in the chat. Are both the Presidential Fellowship and the AGGRS funding for the 2025-2026 academic year, or may it start from spring 2025? So when would these funding for both opportunities be available?
Mm-hmm. For Presidential Fellowship, a few years ago, the university had twice a year competition, and starting I think 2 years ago they reduced it to once a year, which is not a benefit to students. However, we have to deal with just cooperate with the new policy. So every year the deadline is in mid-October, and that's a recurrent deadline for a Presidential Fellowship. With the alumni grant, Ryan, do you know how many cycles of competitions there are?
So both are just one cycle. I think the question is getting at when would the funding be available for? So if selected for both of them, would the funding actually be available to begin?
I think the answer is yes, you can propose that this funding be available starting in fall of 2025 or spring of 2025. Right? That is possible as long as you provide justifications.
I believe that's correct too. I believe it can start as soon as the award decisions will be made later in this semester, so by end of fall, and could begin as early as spring 2025 for both. But for the fellowship, I don't believe it has to start in spring 2025. If you're proposing to begin your 3 consecutive semesters of the fellowship funding for presidential fellowship, it can start in summer 2025 or fall of 2025. It doesn't have to start immediately, but you would want to spell any of that out in your application.
Yeah.
I think that would, showing that you have that grasp of your timeline and that it is realistic, and even that you and your advisor are on the same page, I think is very important. So spelling out what that exact timeline is going to be, including which semesters you'll be using funding for either the presidential fellowship or the alumni grant, would be of benefit to you. Another question, so for the presidential fellowship, will applicants know who the department is nominating to the graduate school? So I believe we will. We will let everyone who applies, the Graduate Studies Committee for Ed Studies will let everyone who applies to our committee know whether or not you have been selected to be put forward to the graduate school. Now, it's important to remember, again, just because the Graduate Studies Committee puts forward your nomination to the graduate school does not mean you have been awarded the presidential fellowship. It just means that our committee is nominating you for the fellowship. And then the graduate school will notify typically our committee and the student when they have made their decision. So we will let folks know, everyone who applies, by that October 23rd deadline that the graduate school has for our committee to let them know our students, 6 students that we're nominating, up to 6 students we're nominating. We will let you know if you're one of those students that we're putting forward or not. We won't not let you know. Any other questions? We are 1 minute over time, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now. Let me find that.